Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome back to the course of public finance. Today we are going to cover the topic of public choice and the political process, which is again very important. Before this, in lecture number 7, we discussed the demand. Actually, we started with the demand of public goods, and we compared the demand of public good with the demand of private goods. The main difference was that in case of demand of private goods, the quantity demanded is dependent on price of the product, and when different consumers are demanding different quantities based on the given price in the market, there is a horizontal summation of the demand curves, and the total quantity decided is actually the sum of individual quantity decided based on the given price in the market. But then in case of public goods, the scenario changes a little bit, because on the x-axis there is quantity demanded of the public good, while on y-axis there is the marginal benefit that each individual derives from the use of the public good given the quantity of the public good, or specific quantity, of course. And in this case, actually what we do is we add up the y-axis, like marginal benefit from for the each individual, and we get the total marginal benefit for the given amount of public good being supplied. Now, based on that, we derived the efficiency criteria, and we defined that marginal benefit for or total marginal benefit for the sum of those individuals would be equal to the marginal social cost, and that would be equal to marginal cost of providing that public good for consumption to those individuals, and also the average cost for production. So all of those would be equal in case of an optimal amount of public good being supplied in the market. Then we also discussed that the concept of voluntary agreement between individuals, in which case everybody was voluntarily telling that how much marginal benefit they would derive from a specific quantity of the good consumed. In this case, marginal benefit is since it is being told by individuals on voluntarily basis, so it was assumed that this was the case in which, for example, smaller number of individuals or a community in which would accept that kind of environment, and they would voluntarily inform that what is the marginal benefit in terms of dollar values they would derive from the use of that public good. In this case, it was very specifically mentioned that this voluntarily sort of an environment would persist only in case of smaller communities where there are less number of individuals, where everybody know each other. For this, we did a graphical example, a numerical example also. We assumed an example of 3 different individuals living in a community and who wanted to hire security guard for that area, and the number of security guards they would hire dependent on the marginal benefit each individual derived, and we wanted to derive the equilibrium amount of number of security guards per week. Based on that analysis, what we did was that we summed up each individual's marginal benefit, and then we saw the cost as around $450 per week for each security guard. We came up to an equilibrium amount of 3 security guards per week, numerically as well as graphically, and we showed that whenever you add their individual marginal benefits, which are also called marginal private benefits, when they sum up to be equal to the marginal cost or marginal social cost, and that would be the equilibrium point. Then we further discussed the concept of Lind-Hall's equilibrium, in which each individual would voluntarily inform about the benefit they would derive from the product, and this scenario was only possible, again as I repeat, this scenario was only possible in terms of a smaller number of individuals or a lesser community. Then we came up to the point where we were discussing that when the community grows larger and larger, there must be certain individuals who would like to be utilizing that public good without having to pay for it, and those individuals are termed as free riders in our discussion. And free riders have a significant impact, because when the communities grow larger and larger, the number of free riders would be increasing, and since the number of free riders would be increasing, then those would be the individuals who would not be willing to pay for it, and the burden would shift on those individuals who would be paying. Now that would only be possible if government is in between, and government decides that a specific amount of payment is required to be paid in terms of a tax for the use of that public good. Now, why would somebody become a free rider in this case? The incentive were, for example, specifically so that if an individual understates his marginal benefit, and then since the public goods are the sort of goods which have positive externalities, meaning that individuals who are not willing to pay for it would also utilize its benefits, so that individual would end up being a free rider by paying a smaller amount, and then there would be individuals who would not be willing to pay at all, and they would also be free riders just for using that good at cheaper rates or at free of cost. Now there comes in the role of the government. We discussed that there are certain compulsory tax allocated by the government on consumers whenever the goods are like being sold in the market, like electricity or postal services or transit services. In that case, government can charge a fee for use of those services, but when the services like, for example, national defense or cleaner air and cleaner water, in that case, those individuals who are not willing to pay, it is very difficult to account for those individuals, and there is a non-exclusion of property of such public goods, which are called pure public goods. In that case, it would be very difficult to track those individuals, so government would incorporate a tax, a compulsory tax, which would ensure that everyone who uses that facility needs to pay for it. That was like the summary of lecture number 7, and now we would like to move on to lecture number 8, which is public choice and the political process. Now this lecture is basically focused on how the choice among different alternatives is made in the political system and how the political process moves. All of these lectures, like recent lectures, are moving under the umbrella of government's role and its importance in an economic system. Now, I hope you realize that from any political decision, like from implementation of a tax, or for example provision of a subsidy to lower income class individuals, or for decision of the government is to go on full scale war with some other country, all these have repercussions on each and every individual. Now since these have repercussions on each and every individual, then these decisions go through a political process in which individuals vote for the decision. Now how this voting takes place and how the decisions are made, that is again a complicated scenario, because we would be discussing the case of unanimous decision in which everyone agrees to accept that decision of the government, which would be very cumbersome and very expensive process. But then there are like 2/3 majority rule, minority rules, and we would discuss all of those one by one in our process of this lecture. So basically, what is the scope? Public expenditure and taxes affect the daily life, and specifically how democracies work is that democracy is the process in which individuals or citizens vote to elect the political candidates, and they become their representatives in the government. Now despite the democracy, there are often cases, what we discussed in what would be the ideal scenario scenario is that if I voted for some decision of the government to take, I should be, that decision should be implemented on me. But when that is now actually how governments work, because since most of the government processes works on the majority rule, then if I want that, I do not need a tax to be applied on me, and if I voted for that, but still the majority votes for the tax to be applied on the country, then in that case I would be bearing the burden of that tax as well, despite my decision not to have the tax implemented. Now, theory of public choice basically studies how decisions to allocate resources and redistribute the income are made through a nation's political system. Now, the plan of this lecture, and maybe the next lecture as well, it depends on how early we can finish this whole stuff. Supply of public goods, equilibrium model, the majority rule, unique and cyclical equilibria, where we would be questioning many circumstances about how public choice is implemented and how public choice is actually comes up. Then the political process, the role of political parties in that political process, the role of interest groups in that political process, and the role of bureaucracy in that political process. You, as students of Masters in Public Administration, would be in one of these roles in the economic system. So you need to understand the impact of all these parties on the decision-making process of the government, and then on the efficiency of the decided outcome of every political process. The supply of public goods through public institutions is discussed under the scenario of how those goods would be supplied in the market and how they would be financed, how their production and supply would be financed. Now, public choice is when decisions are made through political interaction of many persons according to the established rules. Now, what are those established rules? We would come up, that would of course come up under the under a discussion when we would discuss the constitution. Now, there is like public choice versus private choice, and there is taxes versus voluntary cost sharing. What we discussed in the previous lectures was a scenario of voluntary cost sharings in which like three individuals in a community were agreeing upon and debating the issue of hiring security guards for their security of their local community. Now, in that case, what happened was that each of those individuals voluntarily expressed their marginal benefit, that this is the dollar value of the use of that pure public good. But then the scenario changes when the political institutions are involved, because that, and secondly, the scenario needs to change because larger the communities grow, more difficult it becomes to push individuals to voluntarily share the cost. So that voluntary cost sharing might be a theoretical process and might only be applicable to smaller number of individuals, but when larger communities or countries or states are involved, that voluntary cost sharing does not take place that easily. For example, there are certain FM radio stations who might work on charity, who might be dependent on the charity given by its listeners, but many individuals would listen to it without having to pay for it. So that's where voluntary cost sharing becomes debatable. So in case of when there is a public choice and when decisions are made through a political interaction, then in that case there are, for implementation and financing of those decisions, there are taxes involved, and these taxes would be financing all those activities. Then the question arises that what is a political equilibrium, because when there are political decisions involved, there are certain alternatives, maybe 1, 2 or 3 or maybe more than that. So those alternatives are decided upon by some unanimous sort of agreement or by some rule through which the decision is to be made. So there is a political equilibrium, is an agreement on the level of production of one or more of public goods given the specified rule for making the collective choice and distribution of tax shares among the individuals. The whole point of this is that this political equilibrium is basically an agreement of whatever type of or quantity of public good is being discussed, so that the production of that public good, now that decision is made based on certain specified rules, which we would discuss later on. We would discuss various types of rules that can be used. Collective specified rule for making that collective choice, and also how much burden is to be distributed to the users of that public good in terms of the tax. In other words, how much they would share the tax. Now it is tax shares, are also sometimes called the tax prices, are pre-announced levies assigned to the citizens. In a political process, actually it is very difficult to measure the cost of production and how much a public good actually costs for, and how much, whenever it is divided on the average cost, how much to assign to each individual. So whenever there is a political process, the political parties, this is what we would discuss later on again as well, and maybe in this or maybe in the second, in the next lecture, coming lecture. But I need to highlight it right now for developing an understanding that why I said over here that are pre-announced levies assigned to the citizens. Now whenever there is a political campaign by those political candidates, they often usually define their mandate, that this is what we are going to do if we are elected, and individuals choose that mandate, and they vote for individuals, for candidates based on their mandate. Now that would mean maybe some political candidate would say that I would reduce the taxes, the other one might say that I would reduce the taxes on lower class, someone might say that I would increase the taxes to fund so and so activity, maybe for building dams and more roads in the country, and those taxes are normally pre-announced, assigned to the citizens. When citizens vote for those political candidates, they choose the best alternative. They consider that this is the best alternative that should be implemented considering their personal marginal benefit. Now this is where I said that in case of democracy there is an issue that if I vote for the individual, for a candidate who maybe if I want the tax rates to be increased and I vote for that individual, or maybe I want, for example, the tax on lower income class to be reduced, and I vote for that individual, and that candidate loses after the political campaign and not elected in the office, in that case I would still be, those tax rates would not be lower, and that is like democracy. Now what are like tax prices or tax shares? These are portion of unit cost of a good proposed to be provided by the government whenever it is generally assumed that there is total average cost of the public good that the government is providing, and in case that government is providing that good, then its average cost would be, its total cost would be divided on the number of users of that good, and that would be equal to the average cost of a good. So the tax share to each individual would be equal to the average cost. Now what happens is, like if there is increase in the cost of production of that public good, in that scenario there would be an increase in the tax rate, and if there is an increase in tax rate, then it might be the case that most of the people would vote for no increase in that increase in the production of that public good. Now as I was discussing earlier, information on costs are difficult to obtain. So because certain public goods, as we discussed in like our previous lectures, public goods cannot be that easily packaged and sold in the market, like maybe chocolates or ice creams. Specifically the public goods on public goods like national defense or cleaner air. So it is very difficult to cost those public goods, and how much actual cost and how much per head cost would is being implemented. Now in that case, or maybe a future decision, so costing of of a future decision. So in that case, the political candidates who have more information rather than the individuals, then they can use that information in their own benefit. And control over information concerning concerning the cost and benefits of public goods are an important factor which are influencing which influence the collective public choice. Now, certain proposals, as we would discuss again, and we discussed this as mentioned in the second point of the slide, proposals that cannot gain approval under unanimous consent might be proceed under majority rule. Now, there are always cases like unanimous consent would be that everyone agrees to everyone in the country agrees to take up that proposal or take up that, for example, implementation of a tax or a reduction of tax. But that unanimous consent is very difficult to obtain because of involvement of certain interest groups and involvement of different interests of political candidates as well as the citizens, considering their own marginal benefit and marginal cost. So it is very difficult to obtain a unanimous consent, and if that unanimous consent is not acquired, then most of the decisions are taken under the majority rule by the government, which would be discussed in a greater detail. Now, public choice is basically takes place through elections and voting. Now, it is generally assumed that individuals are rational and they evaluate the public goods or goods provided by the government similar to evaluating the market goods, and they, whenever they approach a good for consumption, they consider its benefits and its cost, and they are rational individuals. The individuals make choices given what will be the most preferred political outcome to them. So since they are rational, they make the best out of the possible alternatives, and rationality actually requires that all the rational individuals will take a similar decision under the similar circumstances. So if individuals are assumed to be rational, which is again a greater debate which we would which is not under the scope of this course, but it is my personal view about rationality, but let that go for now. The individual makes choices given what will be the most preferred political outcome to them. So each individual considers their own marginal private benefits and marginal private cost, and they equate those marginal private benefits and marginal private cost to vote for that decision. Now, rational person will favor the quantity of the government supplied good corresponding to the point at which the person's tax share is exactly equal to marginal benefit of the good to that person. That would mean that as we have discussed time and again, it is very important to ensure that marginal benefit should be equal to the marginal social cost. Whenever marginal social cost is greater than marginal social benefit, then there is requirement of reducing the quantity of that good being supplied, and whenever marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost, there is requirement of more production. And a single individual would always choose the point where marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost, and that is exactly what we saw when we were discussing that small community example, and three individuals who were voting to who were discussing actually who were debating and discussing to hire more security guards. The range of security guards was from 1 security guard per week to 3 security guards per week, and they actually agreed upon where the marginal social benefit was equal to marginal social cost, and that was 3 security guards per week. So whenever, like for example, in this case, a rational person would favor the quantity of government supplied good up to the level where his benefit that he derives from the use of that good is exactly equal to the tax share that is being levied upon him. Now, if that would be the optimal point. So if the quantity of that good is more than the optimal level, then the individual would be worse off and he would never make that choice actually in terms of voting. So discussing that in terms of a graph that is being shown on the screen. This is the type of a graph which you have seen in terms of marginal benefit and marginal cost. I would repeat that. On x-axis there is the output being supplied of the public good per year, and on y-axis there is the tax share of the individual, how much he has to pay for the quantity being produced for his use. Now marginal benefit curve is a downward sloping curve which represents that more of a good consumed reduces the marginal benefit that is for that individual. Now it is assumed that tax per unit of output, or the average cost of the per unit of output, is constant over here. That's why it is a straight line parallel to x-axis. The point of equilibrium over here is shown by the point Z, which shows the optimal quantity or optimal output of that public good which should be supplied, considering this voters. Actually this is what he would demand, that this is the amount of public good that he would require, and this is the most preferred political outcome of this voter. And the tax over here represents, again I repeat, that tax on the y-axis represents the cost or the social cost of that producing that good. Now one of the most important things that we need to discuss is that decision to vote depends on benefits and cost, and the probability that voting will achieve the anticipated benefits. Now when an individual chooses to vote or not, he considers the benefits that he would derive out of that voting system, and then what is the cost that he incurs, and what is the probability that his voting, his delivering, his casting that vote would would bring about the political outcome that he expects. So in that case we would consider all the three, or any individual would consider all the three before going to vote. Now what would be the cost actually in terms of voting? The cost would be the time he allocates to visit the poll where he needs to cast the vote, as well as the cost of the information that he needs to acquire before deciding on various political outcomes. Now that cost, for example, the information collection cost might be watching television programs where different candidates are debating, or where different policies are being debated, or maybe going through the newspaper every day to stay updated, and that time that he allocates to those activities also has a cost on themselves. So the total cost for an individual would be the time to visit the poll, and actually the time he allocates to collect the information that is necessary to make a rational decision. Now, so when would an individual decide not to vote? Now, when he would consider that first of all, that his ability to influence the outcome is very low, considering that there are so many voters. So under certain cases individuals would consider that my ability to influence the outcome is very low. In that case the individual would not go for the vote. Then the second would be the closer the alternatives, when the two choices that he has, 2 or 3 choices, are very close to each other, and he would consider that there is very minimal difference among any alternatives being chosen out of the 2 or 3 or 4 options he has, so he would not bother to vote. And like for example, the third case would be when his preferred outcome, what he wants, is too far from the available alternatives. In that case he would again not choose to vote. For example, there is an individual who intends to vote for a political party that does not take part in that election. Then that party's mandate is totally different from the other 2 or 3 parties' mandates. So in that case the individual would choose not to vote. And then if an individual has poor information on the various alternatives available, and or maybe his cost of acquiring that information is too high, in that case the individual would choose not to vote. If you see all these 4 points, which are ability to influence the outcome, or closer the alternatives are, or preferred position is too far from offered alternatives, or poor information, all these represent that marginal benefit or benefit to the individual for going and casting the vote is less than the cost of casting that vote. Because you see, if the cost is like time to visit the poll and the information collection cost, then in the first case, ability to influence the outcome, if he cannot influence the outcome, if he considers that, then the cost would be very high in terms of the benefit that is would be influencing the outcome. But since he cannot, he thinks that he cannot influence the outcome, so he would not cast that vote. Then closer the alternatives are, when the two alternatives are very close to each other, and maybe, for example, the difference is only certain percentage points of tax rate being offered, then he would not bother to vote, because both of them would be the cost of going towards the poll or cost of collecting further information and choosing would be much higher than the benefit that he is deriving from it. And preferred position is too far from offered alternatives. That would again mean, because his benefit would be if he could cast vote for his preferred alternative, and he could create a difference by casting that vote. So if he is not like his preferred position is too far from the available alternatives, then in that case again the cost, like going to the poll and collecting the information, would be too high than the benefit he derives from the voting. And then again, if he has poor information, and there is again, as we discussed, that there is cost of collecting that information, in that case again the cost would be higher than the benefit that he derives from voting. Now, there is a concept called rational ignorance, and that is the idea to many voters that marginal cost of obtaining information concerning an issue is greater than the marginal benefit of gaining that information. This leads the voter not to gather the information and not to vote. So this is the summary of the above 4 points that we discussed: ability to influence the outcome, closer the alternatives, preferred outcome is too far from the offered alternatives, and poor information. All of them would result into to the point where cost, your marginal social cost of acquiring that information, marginal private cost, in other words, marginal private cost of acquiring that information is too high from the marginal benefit, and that is termed as like rational ignorance. Now, what are like the main determinants of political equilibrium? Now, the main determinants of political equilibrium would be the public choice rule, for example, the rule through which the decision is being made, whether it is like a unanimous decision or whether it requires like everyone to vote for it and accept it. Only then that would be it would reach the political equilibrium. Or it is the majority rule, like if 51% of the individuals would select it, then it would be applied. Then there is a minority rule. We would discuss those rules one by one later on. Then there is average and marginal cost of the public good. That is again a determinant of the political equilibrium. Then information available on the cost and benefits, because we discussed that like benefits certain individuals might evaluate themselves, but the cost of the production of more public good would be very difficult to evaluate or to put a price tag on that. So that again results in towards the determinants of political equilibrium. Then the distribution of the tax shares, like how tax is being distributed across individuals. So the marginal tax per unit of output, generally what we would discuss over here is that marginal tax per unit of the output would remain constant. That is for our analysis only. And then the distribution of benefits among the voters. If majority, for example, let's consider an example. If there is a majority rule, that would be the public choice rule, and average and marginal cost of the public good being provided is very clearly known, and each individuals know their marginal private cost, which is in terms of the tax share, the weight that they are being allocated, and they are very clear that what sort of benefits would be allocated to them. Then in that case, the most of the people who are getting that benefit out of a lower tax share would actually cast a positive vote for that, and all those individuals whose marginal private cost is above the marginal benefit, they would not vote in favor of that policy. Now, if any of these conditions would change, then in that scenario, the political equilibrium would also change. So all these conditions actually are defining why they are called determinants of the political equilibrium, is that any of these conditions, a change in any one of these would have a different equilibrium, political equilibrium. We would be discussing all of them one by one under our various points that we would be giving over here. Then we need to discuss the equilibrium model, which is the majority rule. Now, what would be a political equilibrium under the majority rule? In order to consider this, let us consider that there is a good being provided at, for example, $350. Let us take us back to the same old example of hiring security guards and a voting outcome of that hiring of security guards. Now, the whole point of it is that in this case we are considering the voting options rather than like the individuals cooperatively and voluntarily reaching to a solution. Now, over here, let us assume that the cost on the x-axis there is security guards per week, and that x-axis it represents like for example up to 7 security guards. Then on y-axis there is marginal benefit and marginal cost and tax in terms of dollars. The total, actually the marginal cost of each security guard is $350 per week. In this case, when 350 is divided by, for example, 7 individuals, that would be 50 tax share per individual, $50 of tax share per individual. I missed over here to mention that there are assumed to be 7 individuals where there is A, B, C, M, F, G and H, whose marginal benefit curves are shown to you on the screen. All those marginal benefit curves are downward sloping, and they represent that marginal benefit of each individual, how much he would be willing to pay for the use of that product or a given amount of public good. And the marginal benefit is downward sloping because more of a public good they consume, the less value they assign to the next unit that they consume. That is why marginal benefit curves are downward sloping. We did this sort of an analysis in our last lecture also, where we were calculating the demand of a public good when we compared the demand of public good with the demand of private good. The major difference between these two is also the difference over here as well. On y-axis, actually it is the marginal benefit an individual derives or the benefit an individual derives from the use of that public good, considering a given quantity of the public good. While in case of pure private products, y-axis consisted of prices of the products, and we had horizontal summation of all the demand curves to find out the quantity that would be supplied in terms of a given price. But in this case, it is the marginal benefit derived from the use of that public good, and we would sum up the individual marginal benefits. That would be marginal benefit of A plus marginal benefit of C plus marginal benefit of C plus M plus F and plus G and H. Now, how the average cost is 350. So how did we allocate this tax dollars up to $50? Tax share up to $50. What we did was 350 divided by 7, because there are 7 individuals. What we how the each how average cost is allocated to each individual is average cost divided by the total number of individuals, which we discussed in the previous slides, and the sum of the taxes should be equal to the average cost. So we allocate that average cost on each individuals. We divide 350 by 7, since there are 7 individuals, and we come up to the tax share of 50. Now over here, at tax share of 50, each individual's marginal benefit intersects with marginal private cost, which is the tax, which is $50. So each individual is willing to pay a certain amount up to for use of that security guard. Now, how would the decision be arrived in a community of 7 individuals? Now that is again a discussion over here. When we add up all these marginal benefits at 50, we would come up to the total marginal benefit, or the sum of marginal benefits of each and every individuals, up to $350. At point E, it represents that that's total marginal benefit curve, which is again sloping downwards, which represents the sum of marginal benefits of each all of the 7 individuals one by one. That represents a downward sloping curve, and it intersects marginal cost curve at point E. So point E is the equilibrium point, and I hope if you are attentive enough, you would understand how we take up this analysis in terms of graphical terms. So the point E represents 4 security guards when the marginal cost of each security guard is $350. I'm not sure if I need to repeat it, but maybe I should. Because it is a very important concept, how we treat the downward sloping marginal benefit curves in our analysis. So under political majority rule, we use the marginal benefit curves, and the marginal benefits curves, or the demand for the public good curves, are used in a sense that on the y-axis we have the marginal benefit each individual derives for the given quantity of public good, and that marginal benefit declines with increase in the use of the public good. That is why it is downward sloping. So when we need to calculate the marginal benefit and how much, what would be the point of equilibrium, we add up the individual marginal benefits. Like in this case, we added marginal benefit of A with B with C and M and F and G and H, and then we came up to the point where marginal benefit of each individuals were added up to be 350, and the point of equilibrium again would be where marginal benefit would be equal to marginal social cost, and that is always the point of equilibrium, because as I have highlighted again and again, if marginal benefit is greater than marginal social cost, then there is requirement of more production of the good, and if marginal benefit is less than the marginal social cost, there is requirement of reduction of that public good. So in this case, it would be the point of equilibrium is exactly at marginal benefit is equal to marginal social cost, which is the point of efficiency of the public goods. So political equilibrium under majority rule with equal tax shares is defined at the point which is MB represented of the individual M. Now what is the importance of this individual? Because he is actually the median voter. Now median voter would be the optimal political outcome, because before that median voter like MBM, the individuals A, B and C, in their case their marginal benefit is less than marginal cost, and in case of individuals after M like F, G and H, their marginal cost is less than marginal benefit. So individual F, G and H would need to hire more security guards, but individual A, B and C would need to hire less security guards. So in case of majority rule, the unanimous decision would come to the point where the decision would be at the median voter. Median voter is the voter M in case, and his optimal political outcome is actually the equilibrium political outcome. That is the most important aspect of the graph that you see over here. I would like to repeat this discussion only to highlight this point again, that there is a very big importance of median voter, which we would be discussing in terms of political outcomes later on again. Now, what is the importance of median voter? Because the median voter is actually the one who have same number of people on his left hand side and same number of people on the right hand side, and that median voter is the one whose optimal political outcome is actually the optimal political equilibrium under majority rule. And how that comes up is, you see the individuals A, B and C who would be paying more than they need to pay because they voted for 1, 2 or 3 security guards at the tax share of 50. Now in their case the marginal cost is greater than marginal benefit. Now while on the other side of individual M, who's the median voter, there are individuals F, G and H. In their case the marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, and they would like to have more security guards like 5, 6 and 7. So in case of majority rule, the median voters optimal allocation or optimal alternative would be the best alternative chosen, and that would be the point of equilibrium. I hope you understand this, and I would like to take this up in terms of a tabular analysis in which there is the voting outcome of all the individuals for a number of security guards per week. The heading of the slide is voting to provide security protection and election result under simple majority rule. We are focusing on the simple majority rule. Each individual is voting on the basis of their personal marginal benefit, private marginal benefit, considering the marginal cost, which is the tax share. Whenever the marginal benefit is greater than the tax share, they would vote as yes, and whenever the marginal benefit is less than the tax share, they would vote no for that case. Now, what would happen under majority rule is a simple explanation that is being shown in this tabular in this table. On the top we can see number of security guards or increase in number of security guards per week from 1 up to 7. So they are voting how much security guards they should hire. The minimum number of security guards is 1 and the maximum number of security guards is 7. And who are the voters? They are like 7 individuals. There are alphabetically named as individual A, B and C, and then there is an individual M who is, I discussed earlier, was the median voter, and then there are individuals F, G and H. Now under each number of security guards there are votes, whether they voted whether they should hire that first security guard or no, whether they should not hire that first security guard, and on the last row there are results from that voting outcome. Now look at it very closely. For the first security guard, from individual A to individual H, everyone voted as yes. That was the point where marginal benefit was greater than marginal cost for each and every individuals. But when we need to increase the number of security guards to 2, then individual A who was on the most left side of that graph that we discussed, voted no, while all the other individuals voted yes. So this represents that marginal benefit of individual A or voter A is less than the marginal cost. So he voted no for the second security guard. But then based on the majority rule, since there are 6 votes against for yes and 1 vote for no, then the resolution is passed again. Then in case of third security guard, individuals A and B represented no over here, but since they were not in the majority and the majority rule is again 5-2, so that resolution was passed again. Why individual A and B voted no? Because their marginal benefit was less than the marginal cost. Then in case of fourth vote for the fourth security guard, the first three individuals A, B and C voted no, while the rest of the individuals voted yes, and still those are four individuals. That would mean the resolution was passed on basis of the majority rule. Why did three individuals voted, the first three individuals A, B and C voted no? Because their marginal benefit was less than the marginal cost. And why did individual M, F, G and H voted yes? Because their marginal benefit was greater than marginal cost, so they need to increase the quantity. This is the rule that we have been discussing again and again. Whenever marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, it pays to increase the quantity, and when marginal benefit is less than marginal cost, it pays to decrease the quantity. But since we are considering the democracy and the voting outcome, and in case of majority rule, there would always be individuals who would vote no, like in this scenario, but they would still have to pay for the tax share, because that is the majority rule. So in this case, this resolution was passed, and we discussed that this was the median outcome, because individual M was at the median position. There are three individuals before him and three individuals after him in terms of, when we rank them in terms of their private marginal benefits. So what is happening over here, that the fourth security guard resolution is passed. But then we move on to fifth security guard resolution, when they are discussing to increase the number of security guards to 5. The majority rules that there shouldn't be 5 security guards, and that includes the individual M, because now the individual M's marginal benefit is less than the marginal cost. So in this scenario, the voting would fail, and there are F, G and H who are still voting to hire more security guards because their marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, but that would fail under majority rule, and so would the case of sixth security guard, because in that case only 2 individuals G and H would vote because their marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost, but rest of all the individuals, like 5 individuals, would have marginal benefit less than marginal cost. And so did the 7th security guard resolution also failed, because only one individual H voted yes, because his marginal benefit was greater than marginal cost, but rest of the 6 individuals considered that their marginal cost is greater than marginal benefit. So after 8, everyone would vote no. So only in case of first security guard, it was a unanimous decision by everyone, and if we consider an 8th security guard over here, that would again be a unanimous decision of not hiring the 8th security guard. While in between there is we made the decision based on the majority rule. While the 4th security guard was last level of security guard which was hired based on the majority rule, and in that case that was the decision of voter M, because he had the median votes, and immediately after that in case of 5th security guard, M voted no. Now that is why M is the median, and his outcome would be the optimal outcome when majority rule is used. I hope you understand this concept very well now, and we can also look at that graph again where individual M is at the median position for the 4th security guard, and while individual F, G and H are need to hire 5, 6 and 7, while individual A, B and C intend to hire for example 1, 2 and 3 security guards respectively. And the tax share was 50, that was calculated based on the average cost divided by the number of individuals, average cost for production of that public good or provision of that public good for consumption divided by the total number of individuals, that would be 50. That would be in fact 350 divided by 7, that would be equal to 50. So each individual has to pay 50 as terms of tax share for hiring of that security guard, and we added up their individual marginal benefits at 50, and we got up to the equilibrium point where the graph of the sum of their marginal benefits represented the point of equilibrium as E, where it was the cost of hiring the security guards was 350 per week. And we saw that same example in terms of a tabular analysis, and we emphasized in our last graphical analysis and our tabular analysis that voter M is the median voter, and in case of majority rule, voter M's optimal outcome would be the preferred, voter M's preferred outcome would be the political equilibrium in case of a majority rule. Now, what is the importance? The median voter model assumes that the voter whose most preferred outcome is the median of the most preferred political outcome of all those voting will become the political equilibrium. This is a very important implication in terms of median voter, and what we would discuss later on is that even political parties focus on the median outcome, and they focus on what would people expect the median outcome to be, and they develop their political platform based on the median voter model, and the extremes are usually the ones who are the losers. So we would come back to this later on. Now, what is the implication of median voter model? Only the median voter gets his most preferred outcome, not 51% of the voter. So which the one we discussed earlier, that in case of democracies, others would get too little or too much maybe. For example, the individuals A, B and C got too much of the security guard need that they had, and the individuals F, G and H got very less because they wanted more of the security in their community. But the majority rule, which is like which represents median voter gets his most preferred outcome, so and not even the 51% of the voters, because in that case there are individuals whose preferred outcome is much more than the outcome that has come out as the equilibrium outcome. So if we, for example, vote for not being taxed, and most of the individuals, 51% of the individuals vote for having a tax, then it won't be a voluntary contribution sort of environment, that all those people who voted to have that tax and all those people who voted not to have that tax would be allocated based upon their respective preferences. So implications of median voter model is like some people get too little and some people get too much. The greater the dispersion, the greater the dissatisfaction, like the greater the difference between the greater the distance from the median voter, greater would be the level of dissatisfaction. For example, in our example, individual A would be more dissatisfied because he is further away from the optimal number of security guard that he wanted. He wanted one security guard, but now he has to pay for 4 security guards. So there is a difference of at least 3 security guards. So he would be dissatisfied, but so would the individual B and C. But their level of dissatisfaction would be less than the level of dissatisfaction of A. A would be the most dissatisfied, B would be somewhere in the middle, and C would be the least dissatisfied. And so would be the case of individuals on the other side of the median voter, individual F, G and H, because they want more security in terms of their marginal benefit in terms of the marginal benefit, but the farther away from they would be from the equilibrium outcome, more dissatisfied they would be. For example, individual H, who wanted 7 security guards as against the equilibrium 4, he would be dissatisfied the most, and the F would be the least dissatisfied individual in terms of his marginal benefit was greater than marginal cost. Now, Greater the dispersion would mean that more individuals are scattered away from the median outcome, the more dissatisfaction would prevail after the voting outcome, because the equilibrium would be at median voter. And the smaller is the dispersion, the more voter preferences are clustered, the closer to the median outcome, the equilibrium outcome in terms of majority rule, the greater would be the level of satisfaction. Like if you draw a normal curve and there is a greater dispersion from the mean, in case of a normal curve, actually mean is equal to the median, because there are same number of observations on the left hand side and same number of observations on the right hand side. So if we consider that voters are equally distributed around the median and the mean also, there is a normal distribution. So greater the standard deviation or dispersion, greater would be the level of dissatisfaction, and lesser the standard deviation or more clustered the individuals are, the less would be the level of dissatisfaction. Now, considering after having an extensive discussion on the median voters, now we would turn to the concept of political externalities. Now remember that political externality is a different concept than what we discussed, like positive and negative externalities from the public goods. Political externalities are the losses in well-being that occur when voters do not obtain their most preferred outcomes given their tax shares. Now, what would be the political externality in the example that we were discussing? I hope you can grasp the concepts and now, and I assume that certain of my imaginary students repeated that individual A, B and C had a political externality, and so did individual F, G and H. So in our example, those 6 individuals were not well off because individuals on the right hand side, FGH, wanted more of that public good, and individual on the left hand side wanted less of the public good. So political outcome based on the externality, and given the tax share that was $50, there were political externalities because there are losses in well-being that occur when the voters do not get obtain their most preferred outcome. So only the median voter got the most preferred outcome. Now that political externality is equal to 0 if tax shares are adjusted to marginal benefit. Now political externality, for example, in case of individual M, there would not be any political externality because his marginal benefit curve at the given tax share, that was $50, exactly intersected at the point where he needed 4 security guards, and he got the 4 security guards. So in that case there would be no political externality for him, but there would be political externality for rest of the individuals. Now political externality don't exist under unanimous consent. Now that is very easy to understand. Unanimous consent would be when everybody, if for example everybody had agreed to hire the 4 security guards per week, and that was the political outcome, then that would be there won't be any political externality. So in case of unanimous consent, when a resolution is only passed in case everyone, all the involved parties agree, then in that case that political externality does not have an political outcome does not have a political externality. More inclusive majorities protect protect minorities would mean that like the optimal outcome to be considered in terms of political externalities would be a unanimous consent. Unanimous consent would mean that everybody would agree, as I've been explaining. But then if getting an agreement or political externality would be the only cost of not having unanimous consent, then it would be okay to have a unanimous consent. But unluckily that is not the case, which we would discuss later on in our slides in our lecture. So if we consider that political externality is the only cost, then adding more individuals in our terms of majorities, not considering the majority rule 51%, but considering a majority rule that in case of Pakistan's parliament, there is 2/3 of the rule, that 2/3 of the members agree to have only then the bill is passed. So in that case, more minorities, more majorities, including more majorities in, for example, in terms of a voting rule, would protect more minorities, then they would have more chance in this case. But unfortunately, political externalities are not the only cost which are involved, for example, in terms of voting outcomes. There are also political transaction costs. These are the measure of the value of time, effort or other resources expended to reach or enforce a collective agreement, because unanimous agreements are not always possible, and as we discussed that larger the size of the community would be, unanimous consent would be more difficult. For example, in our case where we considered 7 individuals, A, B, C, M and F, G, H. Now these 7 individuals, if unanimous consent was the way of deciding the quantity of that public good rather than the majority rule, then unanimous consent would be that only one security guard would be hired, because only at one security guard everyone agreed. But as we move on to the second security guard, individual A refused or said or voted no for hiring the second security guard, because his marginal benefit was less than marginal cost. So there are of course more time consuming in terms of unanimous consent or political process. There is more effort or other resources expended to reach or enforce a collective agreement. Citizens must weigh political externalities and political transaction costs. So that would mean that there are political externalities involved, and there are political transaction costs. So if we need to weigh, because in terms of, for example, unanimous consent, there is greater transaction cost involved, political transaction cost for reaching that political outcome or equilibrium outcome. But then there is zero political externality involved. But on the other hand, in case of, for example, 51% majority, the simple majority rule, in that case there is like lesser transaction cost as compared to unanimous consent, but there is greater political externality. So this is the reason of this point over here, that citizens must weigh political externalities and political cost while taking which rule to be applied for that public choice. So representative governments economize on political transaction costs, because in most of the nations, in most of the countries, it is not possible to take each and every political decision and consider the vote of each and every individual. That would be a very difficult and costly activity, and that would have high transaction costs. If we, for example, if we need to levy a tax, or for example, if we need to increase the national defense, then we start taking votes from all the citizens in the country. That would be a very costly process, and it would be very difficult to obtain the outcomes, and that would be a very slow process as well. So the political process actually is that we vote for the candidates, and those candidates represent us, because we vote for those candidates who more or less have the mandate which suits our marginal benefit and marginal costs, so cost requirements. So based on that, the ideology is that we vote for the government, we vote for those candidates and elect those candidates in the government, and then we trust their decision, that in that way they would be economizing the political transaction costs. So I would like to give you a recap of this whole lecture to summarize this, so that it is, as I say, that imprinted on your mind before I leave. It would be useful to go through a few of the definitions. The first topic that we were discussing, we have only covered actually supply of goods and equilibrium model, and the next topics would be covered in the upcoming lectures. Don't worry about that, I won't leave anything out of it. So supply of public goods. Public choice is when decisions are made through political interaction of many persons according to the pre-established rules, and we discussed discussed that there is a difference between public choice and the private choice, because in case of public choice, we had the tax mechanism in which each individual is taxed based on the average cost, which we have discussed. Now you would understand it more openly. And then in case of the private decisions among the individuals, not by the voting outcome, there were like voluntary cost sharing, in which we discussed an example in the last lecture, like hiring of security guards, and everybody would voluntarily say that this is the marginal cost, this is the marginal benefit I would derive in terms of dollar of use of that product. So each individual only needs to pay that marginal benefit. But in case of democracy, the system changes, because now you are being taxed, and you are being taxed even if you do not vote, you never voted for being taxed. We discussed that in greater detail. Then what is the political equilibrium is an agreement on the level of production of one or more of the public goods given the specified rule for making the collective choice and the distribution of tax shares among individuals. So political equilibrium, when we need to make a public choice given a set of rules, and that rule was we only discussed one of the rules, which was simple majority rule. So the simple majority rule would take up the issue in which how much more public good is to be supplied and what would be the tax share of each and every individual, and that tax share is in fact the price that also termed as the tax price, and that is the price of actually the unit cost of that is the price actually when average cost is divided by the total number of individuals who would be using that public good, and that is the amount of tax that each and every individual needs to pay. Now increase in that cost would mean that there is an increase in tax rate, and there is a possibility that in that case that proposal can be turned down by the voters. Now the main thing that we discussed was that information on cost is difficult to obtain, and that results into for example some specific cost advantage in hands of the political candidates. Then proposals that cannot gain approval under unanimous consent might proceed under majority rule. Now that is again a possibility, because there are certain rules through which the consent or public choice is to come out. One of them is unanimous consent, which is one extreme, which is that everyone involved need to agree for example, if it is about implementation of a new tax, then all the individuals need to agree that that tax is supposed to be applied, then only then it would be applied. Other than that, there is a majority rule. There are different types of majority rule. The simple majority rule would be 51% of the individuals. Then there are 2/3 of the majorities, and we would discuss that in upcoming lectures. The public choice is basically through elections where individuals are considered as rational individuals, where they consider the quantity of government goods supplied corresponding to their individual tax share, and they consider the point where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. More the quantity of that good is increased, less better of that individual would be. For example, in this graph we discussed that the optimal point is equilibrium point is Z, that is most preferred political outcome for a voter, for a given voter. Voter I maybe, his marginal benefit is downward sloping, his optimal outcome is output of Q star per year. So any quantity being produced more than Q star, let's assume that it is like 2 steps ahead, then it would be marginal cost, or the tax that share he needs to pay would be greater than the marginal benefit he derives from that. Now, how would an individual decides to vote or not? That would be in the case of, for example, the cost and benefits in terms of that vote, and also the anticipated outcome of that, whether it would be close to his optimal outcome or not. Why an individual would choose not to vote, that is ability to influence the outcome, because if he considers that he won't be able to influence the outcome of that voting, he would not vote for it. Then closer the alternatives or choices are to each other, he would consider them same, and he would not consider voting, because even without his vote he would be having one of those outcomes. Then there is preferred position is too far from the offered alternatives. That would mean that if his preferred outcome is very far away from the available alternatives, then he would not consider any one of those. And the last one is poor information. Now Based on these, the concept is called rational ignorance, and in that case the individual would rationally choose not to vote for any of these outcomes, considering his cost, which is the time to go to the poll, or and the cost of the time spent on collection of information would be greater than the benefits that he derives. Now we also listed down the determinants of political equilibrium, which is the rule that is being used for that public choice, and average and marginal cost of the good being produced, as well as the information available on the good, and the benefits, the distribution of those tax years, and distribution of benefits among the voters. And we said that if any one of these determinants change, then the political outcome or equilibrium point might also change. Then we considered the simple majority rule, in which for political equilibrium, and we discussed an example where there were 7 individuals voting to hire a security guard, and based on this analysis there were like A, B and C, then there was M, the median voter, and there was F, G and H. And we again discussed how marginal benefit, downward sloping marginal benefit curve is derived for all these individuals collectively. It is in fact added up, and the average cost is or the tax share that is defined, that is equal to average cost divided by the number of individuals, which was 350 divided by 7 individuals. It was equal to 50 tax share per individual, and their intersection was at the equilibrium point, was at point E, represented by in this graph, which was equal to which represented 4 security guards at the rate of $350 per week. We also discussed the same scenario using a tabular form, in which we concluded that the political outcome or the equilibrium point under the majority rule would be equal to the median voter's choice. And we highlighted the importance of median voter model under the majority rule, and we said that median voters' most preferred outcome would actually be the political outcome. And we also discussed that in this median voter model there would always be individuals who would get less of what they want, and there would be individuals who would get more of what they want in terms of their preferred outcome. So only the median voter gets his most preferred outcome, and rest of the 51% of the voters who voted for that outcome would never get that outcome, because they are not the median voters in fact. So some people would get little more than they want, and some people would get little less than they want. In this case, we specifically mentioned that A, B and C got more than what they want, and F, G and H got less than what they actually anticipated to have. We also highlighted that greater the dispersion in terms of voters along their political outcome, preferred political outcome, greater would be the level of dissatisfaction. That would mean further away from the median you are, more dissatisfied you would be, and more closer you are to the median outcome, you would be more satisfied, and that would be clustering of the preferred outcomes would result into more satisfaction in terms of preferred political outcome and the equilibrium point. Then we discussed a very important factor, which is the political externality. That would be exactly the similar thing that we discussed earlier, that many individuals would not get what they would want in terms of preferred outcome when there is a majority rule, or when there is any sort of voting, except for the unanimous consent. In case of unanimous consent, there is zero political externality, but in all other cases there are political externalities, because certain individuals wanted more for their given tax year and they never got it, and certain individuals wanted less out of their tax year but they never got it. Then we considered that more inclusive majorities protect minorities. That would mean the greater the level of majority that is required to pass a voting outcome, or for in terms of a success of a political voting, then greater would be the protection for the minorities. We also considered that political externality was not the only cost involved. If political externality was the only cost involved, then unanimous consent would be the ideal scenario, but there are other political transaction costs, which are in terms of the time, value of the time or the resources that are spent to reach a collective agreement or the equilibrium point. And these costs increase with more number of individuals involved. So in unanimous consent, the political transaction cost would be greater than and the political externality would be zero. On the other extreme, if the decision is taken by one single individual in terms of, for example, a dictatorship, the political externality would be at maximum, but the political transaction cost would be very low. Now what happens is, like in democratic system, individuals elect the governments, and these governments make the choices for the individuals. So that would be a way of minimizing the transaction cost. Having said this and summarizing all the lecture, I would like to say goodbye to you right now, and hope to see you again in the lecture number 9. Take care. Allah Hafiz.